Now then, I hope, like me, you have gotten your cup of coffee or tea or what your favorite drink is, and you are ready to go deep dive into the method. But before we do, I just want to say a few words about this wonderfully, beautifully colorful diagram here. And that is meant to be a customer journey. So for many of you, customer journeys might be the thing that you see all day, but maybe not for everybody. So customer journeys are one way of describing how a customer interacts with process of product or service. And these are called touch points, these black thingies here. So the touch points between the provider and the customer where they interact. And the green thingies here are gains and things that make the customer satisfied for that touch point. But there might be some touch points where you just can't fulfill the needs of the customer because of some legal requirement or some other thing, or at their current state there might be something kind of really wrong with how the customer interaction is done in that touch point, and the customers are not happy or satisfied. So these are possibilities that you could use. This is one way, one notation that you could use for touch point, customer journey and touch points. There are much more complex ones. I use this simple one a lot in workshops because a lot of times I'm working with people who are not all service designers, UX designers, product designers, or whatever, who are maybe more used to this. In the case of students, for example, that I worked with a lot too, they just need something simple because they are often new to the whole domain that we are handling, as well as all the methods. So that said, you can choose whatever method works to gather the customer requirements, the customer needs, the business requirements, but try to be as kind of end customer centric, end user centric as possible, whoever the end user in that case might be. So for example, when we were doing this KYC, so know your customer journey for a customer project, this is actually a kind of Frankenstein of a customer journey. We kind of took the best and in more interesting pieces from different providers and put them all together. There was another part of this journey which was actually for the compliance manager in the bank or other financial institution, who has to deal with the fact that the organization has to have a know your customer process in place and all the systems in place. And this part of the journey was actually for the end customer, so the customer of the bank, for example. Now, a lot of other companies that need to do also KYC, so know your customer checks. All the companies, legal, accounting, other kind of insurance, who are dealing with money. So there's a money laundering or anti-money laundering aspect to it. But there can be also other compliance reasons, other legal reasons that an organization needs to check who it's actually dealing with. And sometimes it's more simpler when you are dealing maybe with consumers, but then there are organizations and people who need to act on behalf of those organizations. So it can be quite tricky, let's put it this way. And there can be many ways of doing it. Now, I'm going to use this example in the next phases with the value proposition canvas and all the other canvases that we are going to go through. This is just, it's not a made up thing, but it is one representation of a possible know your customer journey. So remember that this is by no means trying to say that this is the only way or the best way of doing it, but for this purpose of showing how you might work with APIOps Cycles method, this is, I think, good enough. A little bit complex for many, but also a little bit challenging, so that we are not just dealing with something trivial, or although trust me, as sometimes people think that even email sending or text message sending or something like that is very trivial when you start thinking of an API for it, but it really isn't. You can do a lot of things around it. So that said, make sure, in case you're colorblind, I'm sorry, try to kind of make some sense out of this. So these boxes are black, these top ones are green, so these are the gains, these are the good things, and these are orange, these bottom ones, and these are the pains, these are the problem areas that impact the customer satisfaction poorly. So I'm going to I have copied already actually these black ones into here as blue stickies. So these are kind of like post-it notes or sticky notes on this Miro board. We often use other boards too, like Miro or something else. And by the way, you're going to get access to this Miro template. So you're going to be able to just use it for whatever projects you have if you happen to use Miro. Now, these blue things, these touch points, these can also be just, sort of as process tasks. But these are something that typically a human would do, or kind of end user of some system, a citizen, a customer, or sometimes an employee, depending on what you are actually building. Now, or actually what your API consumer is building, because we are now in this right side of the API value proposition canvas for a purpose. So we're going to be, well, let's say we're going to be a little bit Eastern on this. So we are going to actually start reading from right to left and not left to right. There's a reason for that, because we are first going to look at from the customer need, the API consuming party needs side of things. So what are their hopes, wishes, dreams, fears, and all of that. And then we are going to move over to the API provider side. And we are going to see, okay, if these are the needs of our consumer or consumers, depending on how much research you have done or how many similar API consumers you will potentially have. And then we'll switch over to API provider side and we'll see how well can we and do we want to meet those requirements, those needs that our API consumers are throwing at us. We might come up with something that they are not actually even asking, although that's always an interesting decision to make. It's also possible that you are the API consumer, you are representing the organization that is only going to ever consume other organizations' APIs. And you might use this canvas for mapping out which of the possible solutions out there, API providers out there, could actually provide the features that you are needing for your needs. So you can have either one of the hats on. You can even have in the same organization the same hat, same kind of, in the same time you can be the provider and the consumer. If you're, for example, working in a team where you are building the whole solution, so you have the front end, the back end, or you have the other side of the integration, and you are also the providing kind of the both sides of the integration and the API to go with it, or whatever is the case. So there are lots of ways of looking at this, but the main thing is that when you're thinking of what would I like to have, you are not at the same time thinking, what can I deliver? So those two things first should be kept separate, because otherwise you are actually blocking out your and your teams or whoever is in the room or in the Miro or in the Zoom or whatever you are with, who are there. You're going to block their innovation, and at some point you might need to rain on their parade, but at this point do not do that first, because actually things might be easier than you think, or go to a completely another direction that you think. Okay, so as said, we are now at the task section here. So these are, coming from the touch points, or these are just process steps, or whatever the job to be done framework you are using. So these are tasks. And now these should be something that makes sense from a business point of view. This could end up being, if you have already an existing API and you're kind of trying to model it here, this could already be your endpoints, but they might not be, so don't be kind of, don't presume too much. Just go and think like you were starting from scratch and write them down. I mean, these are only sticky notes and they're not even paper, so you know, we can quite safely redo things and sort out things without doing a lot of harm. So now that we have our tasks here, we might look at them a little bit. Are they okay? There are maybe some things here I'm not so sure of, but let's start looking at our gains. So I copied the green things here as gains, and they're actually mapping out. I'm moving them a bit to kind of fit them in here, although you can just, you know, have some arrows going in there so that it's easier to track which are related to which, because you are going to soon have a lot of stuff on the value prop canvas. So let's take this here. Now I'm going to show you one particular error that I'm seeing a lot in workshops with clients and students. So when we are looking at this box here, it says benefits for using API. So this is not necessarily the same thing as what makes the end customer happy. So these are not the gain givers of what makes the end customer happy in the touch point in the journey. They might be very well related, but these should be looked at from the API consumer's point of view. So what, for example, a front-end developer or solution developer, what do they not need to do if somebody just provides them a cool, nice, handy API? What complexity does it take away? What can they do? Like, for example, in a machine learning API, if they're not really equipped to develop a facial recognition API or functionality, they can just use that API. Their gain, their benefit would be like, we don't need to know anything about machine learning. We don't need to know anything about facial recognition. We're just going to be able to use that feature in our system, in our solution, because we are using it via an API and somebody else has already built the algorithm. So that would be a benefit again for the API consumers. Now, if you're looking at what we have here, we have a digital capture of customer information for instant autofill. Okay, this kind of could be like, this is definitely a end user thing, but this could be turned into more of an API consumer thing. So what does that digital capture actually mean? What customer information for instant autofill? So it means that if there's a user interface form that the customer would need to fill in order to identify this customer here, or like person or a business, then they don't actually have to fill a form because, or like if they're starting to fill a form, there is already information coming up from somewhere and filling it in for them. Now, this could be turned more specifically into an API kind of thing, that connection to existing customer database. And actually another thing is that at the same time as there is a connection to a business registry and public person registry. So this could be like in some countries you do have them, but not in all. But whatever is kind of the place where you could get people and businesses information with some publicly known identifier, then this could be it. It could also be another option here, of course, would not be that it's not a public person registry, but it's actually a social media or some kind of platform like Google or Microsoft or some else directory that has the users or the person's information if they're just giving an email address that can be identified. So you can even write here something about like with email or with business registry identifier or like business number or whatever the thing is called in your country. So this would be more of a benefit for the API consumers, which would fulfill the intent, the need of the end customer. Now, this is already a bit covered here, actually, like identify, because I have actually duplicated one of the items here. Let's look at what I missed. So look here, I was copying here is manage customer profile, and I now I remember why I didn't copy it properly, because I actually had an issue with it, and I want to share that issue because it is a common issue. So when we have this kind of a touch point says manage customer profile, well, managing is so ambiguous. It can be meaning like creating or editing or doing a lot of other things. But what does this mean actually is that there are some regulations about what kind of data needs to be checked by an organization that has to do this KYC, this Know Your Customer check. And they have to check a lot of things like their own customer data. They have to check the public registry data. They have to check financials, like is there a financial risk? Is there a political person involved or some sanctions or something else? So there's a lot of things that actually needs to be checked in order, for example, for a bank to say this is okay for us as a customer. Remember, if you have been contacted by your bank recently, or you have registered for a new bank account, they ask you a lot of different questions, either digitally or via phone or both. So this is exactly it. Now, if we kind of look at this from an API consumer point of view, so is this okay what it says here? Customer profiling through registries and machine learning. Well, actually, this is not so bad, because this indicates that there are some registries that we should probably connect to that hold this information. There is, I know, I've been dealing with this in customer cases. But then machine learning, we just talked about the facial recognition thing. And let's put it this way, not all development teams who are dealing with a Know Your Customer check or like onboarding new customers process, they don't necessarily know anything about all these checks and risk profiles, and they don't know how to program or teach a machine learning algorithm how to deal with it. So they might want to actually get this as a ready-made thing. This is their need. We want this. This could also be a pain. This could also be here in the pains corner, because we could say, okay, I'm afraid that we need to do something like this on our own because, and we don't know how. So that could be a pain. Now, actually, this other thing here is that the next bit, when the customer is actually being identified, so they are actually showing their passport or they're entering their bank or some other e-signature, and there could be other ways of identifying them. So then they are being kind of creating this profile, and they may be asked some things, and some things are coming out of a register, and then there's a decision being made. So like the bank or the other organization is actually trying to make sure that, are we now okay to, say that this party is going to be our customer, and somehow they have to communicate it to the customer that is the customer okay to proceed, but they are never going to tell you that you are high risk or something like that. It's not a good thing to do necessarily, and there could be even some mistakes sometimes that need human validation. So at some point in the process, they're going to tell you, okay, you're now okay to proceed. So this, from an API consumer's point of view, means that somehow they need to receive the automated risk assessment data, and they have to kind of not maybe get all the details of it, but they need to know that it's kind of safe enough for the client to proceed. So it's kind of like true, false, okay, not okay. Now, the way that this particular kind of gain here is written, this is more from the point of view of the end customer again. So automated risk assessment based on operation data, customer viewpoint, can there be false positives of risk, am I fairly assessed? These are actually almost like pains in a way, because we should separate this. We need to think about, like, if we are writing this as a gain, then we have to know that how secure is this, how trustworthy is this. So we should formulate this that customer is told of the reliability of the check or something like that. Assessment. And the proper return, like the proper response is available via API, so that the API consuming developers don't have to decide again, what can we tell about this to the customer. So it's on the right level of granularity to be compliant but still be customer friendly, what comes out of the API. Of course, there could be some kind of more internal information that needs to be coming out of the API to help make some business logic, for example, in the front end, but those should be separate concerns. They should be really clear for the API consumers, and this could be something that could be either in the gain or the pain corner mentioned. Now, this one, customer can now use fully digital service. Well, it can be a need expressed by the API consumers too, because, for example, this could be something that a totally outside company is doing using somebody else's APIs, or it could be that there's a full-on 100% digital customer service effort going around in the organization, and that is something that they're hoping that the API actually does cover all things. But it's a slightly still different thing than the other ones, because these other ones were functional, and this is kind of like the end game. This is the end result. This is like the hope and dream that, okay, with all of this, we can totally serve the customer fully digitally. So we'll leave it there because it's something that needs to at least be mentioned. It could be a part of the value prop that we come up with. So just to make sure we understand what can go to the gains section. And next, we're going to talk about the pains.